roll. Good afternoon or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to week 3 here in CE 155, Facility Layout and Design. Chef Susan and I welcome you to another wonderful live session. It's going to be a good class tonight. I think we're going to cover some really cool stuff, especially for some of those that are thinking about doing their own place sometime. And for those of you that are not thinking about opening your own place, I guarantee you somewhere along the lines in your culinary career, you're going to be involved in some type of front of the house arrangement, location. Chefs think very logically, we think very operationally, we think very efficiently. So they like to ask our opinion on how to create things in the front of the house. So don't be surprised if you get asked at one point in time. So you might be reflecting upon this class sooner than you think. I want to ask a couple of questions about last week. How did everybody like the assignment last week? Yeah? Aquarian, did you find the ultimate location? Got to unmute yourself. Oh, I can't hear you. There you go.
Yeah. Say it one more time.
Did you find a good location?
I kind of did. I'm at the beach, so I wanted to be like near the beach area and a food truck. But according to what I've been told, like this county would actually give you a spot to go, and you can't just pick your own spot.
Oh.
Yeah.
So state regulations have a lot to do with what's going on, don't they? Yeah. Hi, Chef Suzanne. How are you?
I am very good. I'm sorry I'm late. I was back-to-back live sessions. I was running a few minutes late.
No worries. I welcomed everybody to week 3 live session on behalf of Chefs Suzanne and myself. So I know you weren't here. We're just talking a little bit about last week's assignment. And, you know, I want to hear from some of the other folks out there about how they thought their location search went. Does anybody else want to share? David, what about you?
Yeah, well, I was doing a food truck, so I wanted to be, the bars here normally last call is about 1:30, restaurants close about 12:30, so I figured if I can catch the drunk people coming out trying to hit the finger foods that are quick and fast, and they don't have to go wait in Denny's lines and stuff like that, like, you know, because we got, well, I'm going to keep it real with you, like in the clubs here, they drink and smoke. So you're going to get the people with the munchies and the people who want to sip up alcohol. So I figured that would be the perfect spot.
It ain't just there, my friend. it's kind of the wave today. And so, you know, that's kind of an interesting concept you have, you know. So you're taking a look at some like high fat. We used to do French fries with poutine. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. That's kind of a French gravy that's real heavy and fatty. And when people have been drinking, it's a really popular dish, especially when it's cool outside. So that's interesting that you thought about that. What about you, Justin? What'd you come up with?
Wait a minute. All right. I missed the initial question, but I think we're talking about ideal locations.
Yes.
Yeah. So I live in Southern California, and the larger area is called the Inland Empire. The specific city is Riverside, but in downtown Riverside it's kind of for the Inland Empire, it's a bustling area. And there's a very historic hotel down there that gets a lot of traffic. And so my ideal location would be somewhere down there. It's right in the heart of the city. There's a convention center. There's a lot of businesses. There's 2 law enforcement agencies. There's a lot going on down there. So it would be ideal for me in that location with the foot traffic.
I like it. I like the way you're thinking. Kind of having a built-in clientele right off the bat. That's awesome, Justin.
Right.
I had a facility that was in downtown Phoenix, Arizona, and it was feast or famine. You know, when there were people there, life was good. You know, absolutely. So
yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time in downtown, and it's pretty busy all the time.
Yeah. Lots of traffic. So is that kind of a revitalized area, or is it something they're putting together?
No, it's been there for a while, but the Mission Inn Hotel, like I said, is pretty historic, and most of we've had a lot of current sitting and former U.S. presidents stay there, and most people just go because of the historic nature. So
Right.
even if they're not staying there, they're visiting the hotel to see the architecture and things like that. So it's like I said, there's always people in downtown Riverside.
That's nice. That's nice. One of the things that I do have to compliment you on, you've obviously put some thought into this. It sounds like you like it down there, but it sounds like you also like it for the business. And we talked about this last week, and we're going to talk about it a little bit again today. We love as human beings to input our ideas and choose the location that we want, but we have to choose what is best for the business, and that is the hardest part. You are the inspiration behind the business. You are the creator of the business, but once that business is created, you have to work for the business, right? The business doesn't work for you, and that's the hard part. So, I really respect what you're saying, Justin, and I think that's awesome. Chef Suzanne, any good reviews from last week? Any good stuff to share?
I did. I took notes.
Oh,
Right. I am still in the process of grading, but I did take some notes of some great stuff I saw as far as locations go. A lot of folks looking at target markets as where they're located at, trying to position themselves as close to their target markets. A lot of folks talking about traffic, but upcoming traffic. Have even done some research into highways and things coming into their area, and so have chosen not to look at certain areas because they're rerouting traffic. They thought they knew, and they started doing some research for this and went, oh, that's a bad place. Some folks have even chosen actual building in their town that they're thinking that it's available right now to just kind of do the assignment based on that. So there's some pretty good stuff. As far as issues, some of the, I won't even say worst issues, but some of the issues I saw were a little bit of, I want to say, stereotyping, for lack of a better word. Like, I'm going to have a buffet restaurant, so I'm going to put it by the old folks' home. So, just but other than that, they were really good.
Careful. It sounds like we got the good class this time.
I believe that we did. So there were some good ones, and like Justin was just saying, just having put so much thought, and it seems like a lot of folks want to stay in their area, because a lot of times I see people saying, well, I don't really want to open my business where I live. I want to move a bazillion miles away, where most of these folks are like, no, I want to stay right here. So they seem very passionate and very knowledgeable about their areas, which is super cool. And I think that helps with the assignment.
I love that. Always, we have an old saying that's always plant your own tree in your own yard. And it just makes a lot of sense in the long run. So great job, everybody. That's fantastic. Very impressive to see that people are putting so much thought into this. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of our live session tonight, this is critically important, and you will be cued at one point in time or another during your culinary career about something going on in the front of the house. Isn't that right, Chef Suzanne? And have the servers have you ever had to help the servers arrange a wait station or help them with efficiency reasons?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're so intertwined. I think the best restaurants, the best businesses run when they're very close together. But because I've also worked at those restaurants where there's that divide, and it's almost like a war, front of house, back of house, and those are not good. That's not a good setup.
It's like that north and south issue we had here in the 1800s, isn't it? Yeah, that's horrible. We don't want that. And the front of the house, I don't know how many of you are actually in industry now. A lot of times between the kitchen and the front of the house, the FOH and the BOH, there will be a lot of friction. That friction is generated 99% of the time because of ignorance. Back of the house doesn't understand what the front of the house is going through. The front of the house doesn't understand what the back of the house is going through. They both become under a lot of stress. So there's a lot of friction that develops. put that in your back pocket and remember it for the remainder of your career. Success in this industry is creating a smooth, tranquil environment between the two departments that are in your restaurant. It's so easy. It's such human nature to be able to blame the other side for the problem. And until you can overcome that in your restaurant, you're always going to have that friction. What I have done traditionally with all of the restaurants that I have managed and hotels over my career, all servers must work in the kitchen for a 6-week period, right? We call it culinary training camp. And they have to learn how to butcher. They have to learn how to make demi-glace. They have to learn how to wash dishes. And it creates a much more freely flowing environment between the two. Which
I wish every business did that, Chef.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
The cooks have to serve, the servers have to cook, and then everyone understands where everybody's coming from. I've actually served for several years. Fine dining, casual dining. I had to wear a tuxedo my first serving job. I was in a tux from head to toe, bow tie and everything. So
you want to hear something super cool? At my last position, I was the director of food and beverage, and we redid Conrad Hilton's first hotel. It was a super cool experience. We had a shortage of servers in the dining room one day. This is just about 2 years ago. Had a shortage of servers in the dining room, so I jumped in to help out, and I was serving breakfast. And I picked up a large table, and you know who it was? It was the Doobie Brothers. It was the coolest experience, man. You know, I hope everybody out there remembers them, right? Yeah, awesome, man. And so I mean, that was kind of my claim to fame. I don't know if it counts, but that's it. But that's a good point of view, Chef Suzanne. Yeah, I appreciate that. Moving on to this week, ladies and gentlemen. This week we are talking about the front of the house. And like I mentioned, the common acronym is FOH. A lot of culinarians have a lack of consideration for the front of the house. And like I mentioned, you're gonna deal with it in your career, so you might as well embrace it now and get a full understanding of it. You'll be so much more successful in your journey. When it comes to dining, we have, there's 3 primary parts to a good dining experience. And the first part, obviously, is the food, right? It's gotta have great food. The second part is the service, right? If it's horrible service, you ain't coming back, right? And the third and the often overlooked part is the ambiance, the mood, or the environment of the front of the house. Those are the 3 critical. If you don't have all 3 of those working together, chances of your restaurant are pretty nil. So we as culinarians take our front of the house issues just as serious as our back of the house. So always remember, food, ambiance, service are the critical things here. And you know, just kind of setting the stage for what we're going to be talking about. When a diner, a patron walks into your restaurant, and the first thing when they open that door, it sets the tone for their dining experience right off the bat, right? We all understand that as human beings, right? We're initially visually attracted, right? And then we're attracted through our scent, and then, you know, eventually we get down to the palate. You have to be able to work with all of those senses during your dining experience. So if I open the door to that restaurant and it's not laid out correctly, it just sets the whole mood. And just thinking about this, how many of you have walked into a completely disaster zone type room, like a teenager's room, for example, right? Does anybody have a teenager? Yeah. How do their rooms look? Right? How do you feel when you're in that room? You feel uncomfortable. You're not at ease, right? However, when you walk into a very neat, clean, well-organized space that's properly laid out, right? How do you feel? Right? That's the way we want our patrons to feel, and that's what we need to really focus on with our front of the house design. And it's really, really critical. There's 3 perspectives that you have to design your front of the house on. And it's very critical. All 3 of those perspectives have to be based on your concept. You notice I didn't say you, I said your concept. 3 principles to base on your concept. Critical: the guest, Has to be number one. The operational aspect, right? Does it flow? Can you get in and out of the dining room? Does it make sense? And then the third has to be based on your financial scenario. Front of the houses are just like anything else. We can pump big bucks into them, but that doesn't always mean it's going to work. So it has to be realistic. Something a lot of people, and I know some of you guys are going to ask this here a little bit later, so we're going to go ahead and approach the subject right now. When it comes to space, your numbers that you have already generated or should be working on dictate the amount of space you need. It's basically done by covers, right? Covers are guessed. That's the code name that we use in this industry, right? So in fine dining, we allot generally anywhere between 18 to 20 square feet per person. And then fast casual, we get down to about 11 to 14 square feet per person in the front of the house. And then fast food restaurants, we go about 10 to 12 square feet per person in the restaurant. So for example, if you have a fine dining restaurant and you want to seat 100 people, you're going to need about 2,000 square feet in the front of your house. Does everybody understand that? Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the basic rule of thumb. And then as far as you look at the entire picture, because if you're the proprietor of the organization, you're involved in the entire thing. So if you have 10,000 square feet, which is a very large restaurant, you're going to want to dedicate a minimum of 60% of that space, or 6,000 square feet, to the dining room. 4,000 square feet, or 40%, will go to the kitchen, storage, dish areas, etc., etc. Everybody got that? So it's a 60-40 split. That's down the rule. That's pretty much down the road. It's not a life or death type thing. It can vary, 65-35 or 55-45, whatever works for you. But that's a general rule of thumb: 60% front of the house, 40% back of the house. Does that make sense? Thumbs up. Okay, cool. Want to make sure. How you doing, Ben? Yeah, I love those jerseys in the background, man. Yeah, those things make my day. So when it comes, we're talking about creating a feel, right? Each and every one of you have come up with a concept out there, whether it be a food truck, whether it be a fine dining restaurant, whether it be some type of casual, fast casual, or Chipotle type thing. Each individual restaurant is like a person. It has to have its own identity and its own feel. And one of the ways that we do that in the restaurant industry is by the elements that we choose in our restaurant. Elements are defined as tables, chairs, silverware, etc. And I'll give you an example. If you go into a restaurant and they've got loud music, Formica tables, plastic cups, right? Do you get the feeling of that kind of place, right? Do you see a lot of young people running around in there? Do you see a lot of pizza in your head, a lot of wings, that kind of thing? So if you do the flip side of the equation and they use different elements in the restaurant, and they use china, there's some soft jazz playing, maybe some cello in the background, not jello, but cello, and linen on the tables, right? What do you visualize now? Right? You visualize a little bit more of an elegant service, slower service, maybe a gueridon, a nice cart going through the dining room with aperitifs and drinks on it, that type of thing. So be very careful when you're selecting your elements, because they need to be in direct relation to your concept, what you are trying to portray to the guest. It is critical. Another thing in the restaurant industry that most people don't pay attention to is noise, right? Noise is something that subconsciously affects us tremendously. If I walk into a restaurant and I hear an irritating sound behind me, I don't necessarily pay attention to the irritating sound, but I can't relax, right? If the music is too loud, you can't converse with the people at your table, right? The music is too soft, right? It becomes an irritating noise in the background. So we're not going to get too much into music, but it's really something you really have to think about. These are all the elements that are These are all the elements that are extremely critical. And the reason I bring up noise, because the way you design your restaurant is going to affect the way your restaurant sounds. For example, I had a friend that built a beautiful Italian restaurant, gorgeous, but he did stone tables. They were actually made out of concrete, so it's a very hard surface. He did ceramic wood floor, or ceramic wood type floors, right? And then he had solid ceilings. Right? What did it sound like in there, do you think? Right? It was horrible. Every time somebody did something, right? You know, it was kabing, kaboom, kabing. Yeah, and these are the things that you really need to stay focused on when it comes to developing your own restaurant. You have to be very, very thorough with your design and your understanding. I want to take a look, start talking a little bit about layouts and the importance of the layout. I want to take a look at a couple over here.
While you're pulling that up there, Chef, as far as what you were just talking about with the sound, I know that the open kitchen is, you know, lots of folks look into the open kitchen idea, but I've been in a couple of the open kitchens that are so poorly laid out that you hear everything, and it's more distraction. It's not you're looking at the kitchen going, ooh, oh, it's so loud. And
yeah, it's absolutely true. And you got to remember, open kitchens come with a lot of unseen issues that happen, like Chef Suzanne was just talking about. I was working for Fairmont Hotels in Scottsdale, a beautiful 5-star resort. I was in one of the restaurants, and we got hit with a large group of people. This is right after they opened. They installed the wrong clips in the hood system. We had all the equipment fired up. The clips melted, sent down all the Ansel into the open kitchen, which then sent all the Ansel, the fire retardant, out into the dining room. We had people in wheelchairs. We had elderly people trying to run and get out of the dining room, and that was not a good day. Also, people are very affected in a restaurant. For some reason, I don't know why, that anything slightly unsanitary that occurs in a restaurant will saturate the remainder of the dining experience negatively, right? I don't know if you've ever seen a cook in an exposition kitchen, you know, do this or do this, or, you know, this or whatever, but it sends such a negative connotation when people see that. It's horrible. And that's one of the primary reasons that all exposition kitchens are only built, you can only see from the about the midriff down, because they try to hide a lot of the unsightly stuff that does create those perceptions. So dining room, we were talking about laying out a little bit about your dining room and what that involves. One of the primary concerns obviously is going to be your guest comfort, right? We need to make sure that they have plenty of space in between tables. You want about 3 feet, so there's plenty of space for people to walk through when they getting their chairs in and out. And then the often unforeseen thing that happens in restaurants is operational, right? Operational issues are extremely critical in the front of the house. You have to remember when you are feeding 500 people or 200 people in your dining room, right? That means if you do a 3-course meal, if you're doing 200 covers for a 3-course meal, that's 600 plates that you're having to carry in and out of your dining room, right? That's a lot of dishes, right? And that's also 400 water cups and soda cups and cocktail glasses and everything else in and out. So that's over 1,000 pieces of smallware going in and out of your dining room. And a lot of people don't take that into account when they're designing their dining rooms. So you have to be extremely efficient. And then if you do 200 covers or if you turn those tables twice, for example, they get up, they eat, and then another crew comes down and sits down. Where are you going to have all that backup china to reset, right? You don't want all your busboys, you don't want all your staff running in and out of the kitchens. You have to have places that are concealed within your dining room as what we call wait stations, right? Those are extremely critical. Wait stations. I'm gonna see if I can find one up in here. This there's got to be one in this dining room, maybe in this area right here. That's where, or in this area right over here, perhaps. This is where you would have your point of sale system, your POS system. When you get really mad, there's another term that we use for POS. You can figure that out on your own. And then that is where you will keep all of your backup china. Oh, I dropped my fork on the ground. Can you give me another one? You don't want to run all the way to the kitchen. You want to have it conveniently located. Hey, there's a spot on my glass. Great, we've got additional glassware right here. Water pitchers, iced tea pitchers, basic soft drinks, that type of thing will be kept in the wait station, as well as linen. Those are critical depending on the size. If you have a dining room that seats 200 people, you're going to want to have at least 2 wait stations on opposite ends of your dining room. It's very, very critical. Another area that people oftentimes overlook is the bar. We talked about sources of revenue last week. And revenue sources are huge, and a lot of people focus on food, but alcohol operates at a pretty high profit margin of about 63% industry-wide. So selling drinks can do quite well for you in the long run and help balance out some high food cost issues. So bars can be awesome. Bars can be horrible. Depending on who your target market is, if your target market is young families and millennials, you might want to have some bar area, but you don't want to have a huge bar, because otherwise you're going to abstain all of the family folks, because a lot of things that happen in bars you don't want happening around children. So you need to be conscientious of that. And is it detrimental to your business, or is it good to your business, right? Are you going to be selling wine, right? Does it make sense? So you have to think all these things all the way through. If you have a bar, if you put a bar in your restaurant, make sure that you provide ample space. Traditionally, there is a bar, right, where people will have ice bins, refrigeration. Some have very quick washing machines, storage areas. But don't forget about doing your back bar. That's extremely essential as well. What I mean behind that is where we display our bottles of liquor, cabinets where we keep our back stock. So you need to think that all the way through. It's extremely critical as well. Dining rooms. I don't know if anybody out there has ever been to a location where they get sat at this table right here, which is the entrance to the kitchen, right? You know, and you get to hear all of the lovely things that are going on in the kitchen.
I don't get sat at that table, Chef. I see them bringing me to that table, and I say, I need to have you move me somewhere else. Yeah. I listened. We went to a very high-end restaurant by the name of Sullivan's, and not very high-end. It was expensive, but my wife and I were having a very nice meal there. They sat us next to the kitchen, and I listened to every sad love story in Spanish coming out of the kitchen all night long, right? Some guy had the worst luck with ladies I had ever seen in my life. I wanted to go back in the kitchen and hug the guy. It was horrible, right? But it completely distracted from the meal. It wasn't right. So you need to be very conscientious. A lot of times, what a lot of restaurants will do when they have a table that is sat right in front of the kitchen area, or perceived kitchen area in this case, they'll create a screen. They'll do some type of planting here. They'll build a pony wall. So think about that when you're laying your restaurant out here this coming week. So that is very, very important. In and out of the dining room is very, very critical. That's the flow of your traffic. You guys are now directing flow of traffic. So for example, you don't want the entrance to your dining room to be right next to the exit from the kitchen. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of traffic jams there. You have to think that through. So do not put the entrance to your restaurant right next to the entrance to your kitchen. Otherwise, you're going to get a traffic jam. Do not put the entrance to your restaurant, right next to the restrooms, right? You're going to get a traffic jam there. You have to space these things out evenly. You have to remember, when people are in restaurants, they're not always focused. We're hyper-focused when we're in our restaurants, because that's our livelihood. They're relaxed, they're eating, they're having a good time, they're not paying attention. So don't put a wait station
right in front of the entrance to the restaurant. Otherwise, people are going to be bumping into you all night long. So make sure you lay it out effectively, allowing enough room for servers, service staff, and guests to be going back and forth, if at all possible. Does that make sense to everybody? Chef Suzanne, did I forget anything on that one?
I know when you were talking about things behind the bar, you talked about coolers and warewashing, but also trash cans and hand sinks. Bars.
Good point. Good job. Yeah. Ladies and gents, make sure that you include that type of information. Chef Suzanne will be very conscientious of that. Things like hand sinks are not things that we're imposing upon you. These are things that are enforced by the local the local folks generally at our county levels here in the United States that will certainly have a nice little chat with you if you don't have one. So do it. Moving on back to the dining room. As you're thinking about your seating is an extremely critical issue. A lot of people love those big tables, right? In restaurants, we make money off of seats, right? Every seat generates something. So, for example, if I have a $25 per person check average, right, and I have a table that seats 4 people, and only 2 sit at the table, right? That means I lose $50, right? Does that make sense to everybody? However, if I have all 4 there, then I get $25 per seat. But if I only have 2 at that table that only seats 4, then I lose that revenue. So we have to be very conscientious about that. A lot of times in industry, what we'll do is we'll take 2 tops, and those are tables that accommodate 2 people, to bring them together to accommodate a group of 4. So dining room tables can be segmented into certain sizes according to what your needs are. It's perfectly fine to have some larger tables for larger groups, but do not focus your whole dining room around that. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of revenue in the long run. You need to keep your dining room as versatile as possible. And Chef Suzanne can back me up on this. There's going to be a lot of nights when you're full bore in there, and then somebody shows up with a table of 16. You've got to scramble, and you're starting to move furniture around. So think about it. Don't be putting huge Roman columns in the middle of your dining room, and there's a reason we don't do that, because they can't move them, right? So you're making money off of every inch in your restaurant. Make sure it's versatile and available. Booths, I like them. When I go out to eat, I enjoy them. One hotel I was a F&B at, our booths actually had curtains. It was a very elegant, very high-end dining room. Don't do that, because then you run into problems with younger folks in there. But it was a very nice look. Booths could be very, very, very rich, very elegant feeling. But once again, those are something you cannot move. So think about it clearly. And when you have parties that have small children, booths become very difficult to maintain as well, because things like high chairs and everything else don't fit in there too well. Something else I wanted to talk about when it comes to ambiance. This is critical. Has anybody ever thought why McDonald's generally is yellow on the interior? Has anybody ever thought about that? No? We were talking a minute ago about how we are subconsciously affected by that dirty room, how we're subconsciously affected by that sound in the background. Well, yellow is a color that makes us feel very, very uncomfortable and prevents us from loitering. Does that make sense? So yellow means caution to us, especially to those of us that drive, right? When we sit in a yellow dining room, we have a tendency not to relax. Right? So they do their booths yellow in order to stimulate the people to get in and out. Another color to avoid in restaurants is blue, right? There's not a lot of blue foods, and they say blue is the most unappetizing color out there. And so rarely do you see a baby blue restaurant out there, and that's the reason. So just to think about that. Let's take a question here. How about Justin? What's going on?
Just real quick, you were talking about the 4-person seating and only seating 2 people there. My wife and I went away this past weekend, and the hotel we were at had a restaurant, and we went down for breakfast, and there was hardly anybody in the restaurant at the time that we went. And when they seated us at a 2-person table, but we asked if we could move to a larger table. And they were very hesitant about it. Is that, given the fact that there were very few people in the restaurant, but is that the thought process? Like, I can't seat 2 people at a 4-person table?
That was probably the mentality that had been passed down by upper management. Generally, you get a lot of floor people that don't think that. But I would assume, A, they either had reservations coming in, or B, yes, they wanted to fill that with parties of 4.
It also could have been the server stations. So if certain servers, so like maybe they would have had to have moved you into a section where there isn't a server, or maybe that server already had 3 tables and you would have been a 4th, and so it could have overwhelmed another server. So just from my serving background, that's what I would is another option.
That's a really valid point. What they do in a lot of traditional dining rooms is they'll break that dining room up into 4s, for example. So there'll be 4 different territories, 4 different servers. It'll kind of work like a clock. So 1 gets sat, then 2 gets sat, 3 gets sat, and 4 gets sat. You might have been, in server 3 section, and that's why you ended up at that table. So that's a great perspective.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because that's happened before, and I've never quite understood the hesitation when there didn't seem to be a crowd of people, that were biting for that table. Why is it an issue for me to sit there? But I get what you're saying, so I have to be more cognizant of that next time, so I don't.
But you know what though, Justin, it's always been my mentality, and that I put into my front of the house staffs. I don't care where they want to eat, we're going to serve them, right? They are here to spend their money, and we're going to take care of them. And we're going to give them the best possible experience. And you guys all need to carry that forward into your industry. You know what? If somebody wants to sit in the parking lot and eat their dinner, I don't care, man, right? Their money.
I got you.
Yeah. So, does that answer your question, Justin? You all good? Yeah. Let's talk to Warren over there, my buddy. What's up, Warren?
Hi, Chef. We use a combination of both at our place. We have a rather large main dining room with a secondary private, but we have booths around the outside walls. And then the center of the floor, we have open for 2 tops, 4 tops. We have some of the 6 tops that those don't get moved much, but it seems to work out well that the booths are around the outside and we can work the tables in the middle. We have one section that's right close to the kitchen door that has two tops. Obviously they can be made into a 4 top, but depending on who's driving the line that night, those tables disappear.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the way you're going to see it quite a bit in industry, is they will lay the booths out along the exterior of the walls. Number 1, a lot of times those people like to be a little bit away from the action. Number 2, the tables are versatile, right? So that allows them to work and move around. Lynn, did you have a question up there? Lynn, did you have a question? Let me unmute.
I'm lost here.
You're lost?
Yeah, I got lost.
Oh, okay. What's that?
Worked in the food service industry for years. And the one thing that we were always told was it doesn't matter what the issue, the customer is always right.
Most of the time, yes.
Now, if they want to sit somewhere else and there's an open seat, then we had to move them.
Right. Yep.
And they all put another waitress over there.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I'm glad that you bring that up, and I wanted to kind of piggytail on that a little bit. There are times, and Chef Susan will know this, when you are dealing with customers that are just being a little bit irrational about what the issue is. Now, one of the big successes in this industry is taking that irrational person who is extremely incorrect, wrong, and turning it into a positive experience. It's called wowing the customer. It's taking an extremely negative situation, right, and making that customer the happiest thing on the face of this earth. And that is one of our goals. We are guest service individuals. As chefs, we focus on guest service. That's what we do, is we take care of people. Never forget that along your journey. All of you, every single person on the screen is going to be dealing with a customer at some point in time that is not satisfied with what you have done, right? It is up to you, number one, to smile, to listen, right? And to address what these customers, what the customer's needs is, and turn that customer into a happy guest, someone that's going to come back again. That's success, right? So going back to the seating, so we're talking about the chairs and all of that kind of good stuff. You know, somebody, and like Warren was saying down there, they have some 2 tops that they push together for 4 tops occasionally. And that all goes back to keeping your restroom, or not your restroom, we're going into restrooms here, but into keeping your dining room as versatile as possible. Now, we all want to be number 1 in the number 2 business, because restrooms are critical in the restaurant industry. I can't tell you how many people are strongly affected, number 1, by the location of the restroom, and number 2, the condition of the restroom, and number 3, the ambience of the restroom. If you have a restroom that is not up to par, it is going to set a stigmatism in the guest mind about the sanitation aspects of your entire restaurant, right? There is no debate about that. Yeah, and restrooms must be conveniently located for the guest access. It's extremely important. And when people design front of the houses, they oftentimes have a tendency to overlook the restrooms, and those restrooms can leave a tremendous stigmatism in a guest's mind. Don't dump all of your budget into the restroom. It's not a huge issue. We are chefs. I know this is culinary school. This is a critical part, however, of the front of the house operation. I always recommend definitely have a separate restroom area for your staff. Staffs are oftentimes in a hurry and sometimes not as good in there as we should be. But if you take a look at the restrooms here on the left-hand side of the screen, they certainly set a certain image of what that kitchen must be like in this place. And then, obviously some gorgeous facilities over here that are extremely well maintained. That tells me that kitchen's probably in great shape. So definitely be very conscientious about your restaurant or your restrooms. Critical. It pays dividends. In all of our restrooms, we always put the sports page above the men's urinals, and it just, these are just little touches that really pay dividends in the long run. Moving on back to the front of the house, some of the key areas that need to be addressed when you're working on your dining room. I understand that some of you are talking about food trucks, and we're going to get into that in just a moment, but for a generic layout for a restaurant or a cafe, make sure that you have ample space in your entry, also known as your foyer, right? Extremely important. Make sure that you have a clearly marked and defined hostess area. Okay? There's nothing more frustrating than walking into a restaurant and not knowing or understanding where anything is, right? It has to be clearly defined. You deal with a lot of elders, you deal with a lot of younger folks, you deal with a lot of people that are just busy. Clearly define your spaces. So you need your foyer, you need to have your hostess area. Okay? And then we talked about the bar and the lounge area. Be very conscientious of that. Don't dictate too much space to your bar, because that will affect your liquor license in a lot of locations, because liquor licenses are oftentimes based on revenues. Does everybody understand that? The liquor license they're not just regular things that you buy, like a license plate for your car. A liquor license, for example, oftentimes if you sell more than 60% of your revenues are from liquor, then they're going to call it a bar. and then you're going to have to pay a tremendous amount of money. Or if it's in the reverse perspective, then you're called a restaurant. State of Arizona, it's a number 6 license, and it's extremely inexpensive, a couple $1,000s. So very conscientious about the size of your bar. If you do put a bar in there, also think you will have a lot of people that sit at your bar and like to eat, right? Because you want to be selling food all the time. That's what we're here for. So you want to make it, you want to make sure that bar has access to the kitchen for service purposes. It's very, very important. You know, we talked about the dining area, making sure that it's very versatile and it's open. And talking quickly about bakeries and delis. How many people out there are thinking bakery deli? Anybody? No? We're going to touch on it quickly then, just in case somebody is going to watch this a little bit later. Your biggest concern is display of your products, ample space to get in and out of the bakery, right? You want to be able to display all your products in a nice, clean, efficient manner so guests can visually see what your products are. You need to make sure that you leave enough counter space for packaging of those products in your deli cases. You need to make sure that you have hand sinks. You need to make sure that you have proper refrigeration up there. So you are actually bringing some of your kitchen equipment from the back into the front. So you need to be very conscientious of that. Chef Suzanne, did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Basically what you were just saying, when you're dealing with display cases, so bakeries, some places that have the delis built in with meats. There's a lot of restaurants that have like the display cases with pies. Came off like Perkins, and then there's Village something. Those places have those display cases where you walk in and boom, there's pie. So they're going to serve out of those display cases. So you need to make sure you've got trash cans behind it, hand sinks nearby, that sort of thing also. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to think everything through. And up here on the screen, there's a look at some deli cases here that are pretty traditional for a bakery style restaurant. A lot of them, depending on what's in there, will require refrigeration. So you need to be conscientious of that. You need to also be conscientious of room to store products out there, store boxes, packaging material, beverage stations, and all that other kind of stuff. So there's a lot that goes into those bakery deli type setups. They're not as simple as you might think. And then up here is a nice, clearly defined hostess area. You notice there's no signage, but it's clearly defined by the design and the nature of it. And then just some simple dining room seating up here. Plenty of walking space. I love the elements that they chose in this restaurant. It tells me that they've got some wood burning ovens in there. They're cooking pizzas, and they kind of incorporated that into their dining room, and I think that's pretty cool. Down here is a really cool bar area that's in a hotel, nicely laid out. And then we talked about wait stations, and I don't know if everyone's seen those. This is an old school wait station up here, and this is one that's a little bit more modern. The reason I like this picture, it's got the wheels on it, which indicates that this wait station is mobile. And I kind of like that from an operational standpoint. It makes a lot of sense. Also, for any of you that are in thinking catering, right? Okay, if you do only baked goods, that's it, just baked breads or cakes, that kind of stuff, there is a law in the United States. It goes across all 50 states. It's called the Cottage Law, and you are allowed to bake in your house and sell. However, if you do any kind of hot food preparation or anything other than baking, this could be from selling sauces at a farmer's market to doing catering in people's homes, it is not legal to be producing this from your house. It is illegal based on the health codes, because the health department cannot get into your house to inspect to make sure that everything is NSF and everything is done in a sanitary facility. You must produce your food in a licensed facility. A licensed facility would be a shared kitchen, a commercial kitchen, a kitchen that has its health permit, its health license hanging. So if you plan on doing a catering operation for this, we're going to talk about what we'd like to see here as far as your dining room setup here in a few minutes. So hold on tight to that. If you want to help me remember, I'll certainly bring it up again. And then food trucks. I know several of you have mentioned food trucks. Anybody out there into the food truck thing? Yeah, cool. I love the aspiration of doing the food trucks. There's kind of a cool thing about them. You know, it's just kind of a cool feel, you know, and being able just to drive home, you know, who else can drive their office home at the end of the day? We talked about food trucks a little bit last week, some of the financial concerns and some of the long-term concerns with food trucks. So certainly be conscientious about that. But food trucks do involve FOH as well. And it is something that you will need to do this assignment with. We understand that you will not be seating people inside the food truck. However, oftentimes people will sit outside the food truck. And then there's also ambiance associated with the food truck, the actual appearance of it, right? How you lay your condiments out, your ordering system, right? The communication for picking up your food, the location for picking up the food, and then the actual decor of the food truck is something that's interesting as well. They're done oftentimes with very eye-catching, very attracting type elements. And so, you know, if you take a look at this food truck up here in the corner, the one that's teal, there's a lot of front of the house aspects to that that Chef Suzanne and I have been talking about with different condiments, different beverages, all that is essential signages out here. For this assignment, we would like to see you put a couple of tables and chairs into your seating area. So that's extremely critical as well. So do not turn a blind eye to your front of the house issues if you are a food truck, because guess what? You're going to have customers that are in the front of your house. So it's just a simple rule of thumb. Did I miss anything on that one, Chef Suzanne?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think so. I know that, just to jump back to cottage laws real quick, when you were talking about baked goods, and there are some places that the baked goods that you can do from home are also restricted. So you can't do like cheesecakes, lemon meringue pies, anything that has refrigerated, like has to be temperature maintained even after it's made. So some places you can't even do like a red velvet cake if it's got the icing that needs to be refrigerated.
Icing.
Yeah.
Great job bringing that up. That's what we refer to in industry as TCS foods. Technically, it's TTCS, time temperature control for safety. Those are foods that are extremely susceptible to temperature variations anywhere between the 40 to 145 temperature range, or 35 to 140, depending on where you're at in this country. So Chef Suzanne is exactly right. So the cottage laws will be a little foggy. Always check with your local regulatory authority before you decide to start doing it, because it ain't worth it in the long run. They're probably not going to put you in the slammer. They're not going to throw you into Fort Worth, but you know what? They're going to dig in your pocket a little bit if they catch you doing something. So be conscientious. Let's take a look at this week's assignment as we are moving forward. And can everybody see it up here on the screen? Did I click the right button? Yep. Okay, so we're going to start out this week. We're going to be working on slides 5, 6, and 7 this week. We're going to be laying out our dining room. And this is a generic shell. You need to have a clear and concise concept listed. You need to have a clear and concise understanding of the way you want your dining room to look, because you are going to put this into the diagram. The diagram that is up on this screen, this is in your facility layout tool. That is in week 1. You used it in week 1. Scroll down to slide 6. This is where you'll find this information. This facility layout tool is extremely versatile. If you want to change, some of these walls, make them a little bit bigger. You can actually angle them if you like to, depending on what your concept is. So certainly, be as creative as you like, but still be conscientious of the guest, the operation, and the financial ramifications. These are pre-listed. These things up here are not butterflies. They are actually entrances and exits. They can be located anywhere you want. Here on the diagram, just simply click on them and drag them to where you would like them to be. And if you notice on this diagram and all the features that we're going to be talking about, there's a little dot right up here, right above when you click on it. And if you click on that, that's going to help you rotate the object, right? So I just rotated the door. I want the door over here. I need to rotate it just a bit more until I get it all lined up. And that's good enough right now for talking purposes, but that will work as well. And we would have really appreciated, it'd be very helpful if everybody this week up here on the toolbar, you're going to see a little box that says T in it. If you could just simply click on the T and then click and drag a small box, right? And then just help Chef Suzanne a little bit by signifying what your thought process is, right? So I just put the front door in there, right? So now when we look at the diagram, it makes it a lot easier to understand what you're talking about, front door. If anybody has any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to me following the class. Shoot me a text. I'll pick up the phone. I'll talk to you. I'll explain it. Going through the remainder of the diagram, if you scroll on the bar here on the bottom, right, and if you scroll over to the right-hand side, you're going to see your furniture that you're going to place in your dining room. Remember, we talked about the amount of square footage you need, right? So we say 18 to 20 square feet per person in a fine dining restaurant, 100 people. It's got to be about 2,000 square feet. So Chef Suzanne is going to be looking for that amount of seats, right, and that amount of size. So you need to be conscientious about that while you're doing this. You notice there's not 100 seats here. So what you're going to do is you're going to click, press down on your right-hand side of your, or left-hand side of your mouse, and you're going to drag your object to where you want to place it. Oops, where'd it go? Okay, so you're going to drag it to where you want it, right? And if you notice there is only one of these four tops, or table with four, you're going to right-click on it, you hit copy, then you move it over, and you hit paste. And then you can just, they're like rabbits. They just start reproducing, right? Paste, right? And then if I want to do this big table up over here on the screen, I'll drag it down, drop it, and then if I want to rotate it, it's got the blue dot right up here on the top. Yeah, and I can turn that any way I want. If I want to have two big tables, I hit copy, click, and then paste, and I can put that other big top wherever I choose to do so. So we have bar stools up here, 2 tops, 4 tops, 6 tops, another version of a 4 top. So there's plenty of stuff to work with. Lighting is huge in restaurants. Lighting creates a lot of the ambiance that's going on. You don't want to run 48-inch fluorescent tubes in your restaurant. It doesn't work. So you want to, think about your lighting and where you're going to place it a little bit. Trash cans, like Chef Suzanne brought up just a moment ago, oftentimes overlooked. It's a critical part of operational effectiveness. So if you have only trash cans in your kitchen, that means your server is going to have to walk from here to here every time they want to throw a napkin away. So you have to think about the amount of footsteps we take. POS terminal, we talked about what that is. That would be for the wait station. That's where servers are going to put their orders into the computer system, which will then send a ticket to the kitchen. And then a Gueridon. I don't know how many people out there are familiar with Gueridons. Right? Gueridons are something that are kind of not too much in style, but it's something that goes back to the olden days of fine service. And those are the carts that they push around dining rooms. They'll have bottles of aperitifs. They'll do salads tableside on them. They'll do fish preparations tableside on them, Dover sole, that type of thing. So if you want to have a Gueridon, certainly feel free to place it. If you're doing a taco place, I wouldn't recommend a Gueridon, but if you're doing a fine dining restaurant, certainly go for it. Display case, that would be something if you're doing your deli or your or bakery. So you can replicate your display cases as much as need be. Right? So we've got 1, click, copy, boom, paste. Now I've got 2. So They reproduce rather easily, and there's plenty of them, so use all you need. Bar. As we spoke about a few minutes ago, you want to make sure that if you do decide to put a bar into your restaurant, you have your bar where people sit, right? So, you can pop a bar stool down here. Bar stools, you're going to reproduce them, right? So you have plenty of seating, and hopefully your customers stay sober enough that they're not making a mess like this. But so you're going to have your bar stools up there. Make sure you have a bar back, like we talked about a few moments ago. Chef Suzanne will be definitely looking for those hand sinks for proper refrigeration and that type of thing as well. Sinks, et cetera, et cetera. Do I have any questions on that part of the, on that part? Does everybody understand that? Chef Suzanne, did you have anything to bring up on that part?
I will. When it comes to your front of house, can you go back to that real quick, Chef?
Sure.
If you're just pulling things from the side and placing them, you don't have to tell me what they are. I can look at this and know that that's 2 12 tops, 3 4 tops. There's a bar stools, a Garadon, a trash can, 2 display cases. I know what everything looks like, so you don't have to label those. But if it's something unusual that you're adding, or like that I can't tell just by looking at it, like which one's the front door and which one's the back door, and which one's the kitchen door, that you might label. But most of the things you don't have to label. You can just move them over. I know exactly what they are.
Right. What are some of the biggest things you're going to be looking for in here?
When I'm looking at this, I'm looking to make sure that it's not super crowded, that there's not a whole lot of stuff maybe blocking doors, making sure there's sinks, trash cans. That's really about it. And then I make sure that the amount of seats that are here is the amount of seats that's in the seating worksheet that you're getting ready to show.
Uh-huh.
And so just making sure that there's a good flow to it, and it makes logical sense.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, make sure everyone out there also focuses on the flow. That would be the operational aspect that we've been talking about. Extremely critical. You want to prevent traffic jams. Think it through. If you've got a 12 top, that gets up, walks out, and you've got the restroom right next to the 12 top with the wait station right next to it, that's right next to the kitchen door, you're going to have a bad intersection right there. So think that through before you do it. The next thing that we're going to be taking a look at is we'll take a look at this. No, we talked about the food truck. I did want to mention quickly though, if you are doing a catering operation, I think it wouldn't be unusual for someone to say, hey, I want to be a caterer. How am I going to do my front of the house? We would like to see you set up an example of a dining room that you would use for a catering function. So if you're going to be doing a wedding for a served wedding for 125 people, you're going to lay that out here on this diagram where you would put the tables. They're still going to have wait stations. They're still probably going to have a bar. So everything we've been talking about throughout this this class applies to that. Does everybody understand that? So that would be the answer. The food truck, we talked about this quickly. We don't need to go into too much detail. This would be your front of the house area, which would include your condiments and all that other kind of good stuff. Down here, this would be the other part of the assignment. Part 2 of the assignment. There's 2 parts this week. Your seating capacity. This is how we're going to figure out how many covers we do on a daily basis, or how many covers our dining room can accommodate. In the restaurant industry, a cover is a customer, right? That's what it equates to. So if your seating capacity in your restaurant is 100 people and turns, right? You have 100 seats. How many people are going to sit in that seat throughout the course of a day? So let's say you have, you turn each seat twice for lunch and once for dinner. That will be 3 turns. Is that correct? Does everybody follow me on that? Okay, so that would be 3 turns. And then to figure out how many covers, you're simply going to do 100 seats times 3 equals 300. Okay. In industry, we really zero in on this number because it helps dictate our staffing levels. So we get very conscientious about this. So you rarely see a solid number, whole number for this in industry. So that's how you fill that out. Here where it says insert images, you are going to collect some images off the internet that represent the mood and the style of your restaurant. Okay, you can Google like color palettes, for example, to get the color scheme and just clip and paste a picture in here. The style of your dining room, I had several pictures here a few minutes ago, and I just pulled these right off the internet. These would be acceptable things to be pulling down and putting in to the actual area right in here. Choose a lot of pictures. Give Chef Suzanne a good feel of what you're thinking. Do not cut and paste one picture that means nothing because it doesn't really tell a story. Okay. Am I missing anything on that, Chef Suzanne?
No, this is a great place to show all the stuff that you've been thinking. So put some pictures of tables that you like, chairs that you like, light fixtures, paint colors, maybe some fun decor. Maybe even a host stand if you're going to have a bar, maybe a bar that you like. So just load it up with pictures. You can put all sorts of stuff in there and really show what you're thinking that you would like to do.
Awesome. Yeah, good suggestion. Great suggestion. Let's talk to David real quick, and then we'll talk to Ben. What's going on, David?
Okay. How do you count the covers on a food truck?
Okay.
No.
Okay, that's a great question. You in your business plan are going to come up with cost, right? It's going to cost me $500 a day to operate my food truck. The average cost of a dish on my food truck, I'm going to sell it for $5 each, right? So that means you're going to have to do a minimum of 100 covers a day just to keep your food truck open. Does that make sense? So it's kind of a reverse perspective versus a freestanding restaurant. You're going to have to generate a rough number in your head about how much it's going to cost you to keep your truck open on a daily basis, what the average menu price is on your menu, the average item price is on your menu, right? And then that will tell you how many covers you have to have. Right.
We wouldn't know that till about 3 months in because you still need to figure out how much gas you're running off your generator, how much oil, all the stuff that you're using. So it might take some time to figure out how many covers you need to break even, right?
It will take you some time to develop solid numbers, but you can never go into it blind, right? So you have to have a reasonable estimation as to what those costs are before you even start out. Because, you might end up with a food truck that you have to do 1,000 covers a day because of costs that you didn't associate. So you really, it's a major investment. So you really have to get all those numbers as solid as you can. You're absolutely right, though, David. It does take some time to establish the solid numbers, right? Does that answer your question? All right, let's talk to Ben. What's going on, Ben?
Nothing much, Self. Quick question for you. I noticed on the diagram they didn't have like the booths up there. So what do we use for booths?
You can, Chef Suzanne, what do they do for booths?
That's a really good question because I don't believe there is a booth in there. So you're welcome to just make a box and just label it as booth or just, I think there's tables set up certain ways. Mm-hmm. So you may be able to set up like, say, those two tops all along next to each other that way. And so that may make it easier.
Okay. What about like overshadowing certain items, like for the lighting? Like if we had lighting going over that table, are we, will the diagram allow us to put a light over a table? Or you
should be able to do that. And as far as lighting goes, it's not something that I take off for. Lighting is more of just something so you can kind of get an idea of how to start setting that up. But it's not because a lot of folks, it's really easy to forget the lighting, but I encourage you to put the lighting in just so you can really get a feel for what you're doing.
All right. What about the sinks? Is it mandatory to have, in the front of the house? Like, I know you saying don't forget about the sinks.
In certain areas, behind bars, behind or in like server areas in near display cases. But if you're not going to have, like if your server area is going to be like, you have to go into the
next room.
Right.
Okay.
Well, not in the restroom, but you should have sinks there too. But if you're going to go like into the kitchen, like in between the kitchen and the dining room is like a server area that the customers don't see.
Okay.
You don't necessarily have to put that in there. If you've got a super, super fine dining restaurant, you're probably not going to have sinks out anywhere in the open, except for maybe behind a bar.
Right. You're not required. Yeah, you're not required to have a hand sink in the dining room. Your service staff, you are required to provide reasonable access to hand sinks.
Okay.
So, and that's kind of the way the law speaks. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that's it. Thanks.
Cool. All right, ladies and gents, let's take a quick look at our assignment before we wrap up class here. So this week, you're going to be working on those slides that we just took a look at. You're going to be filling out slide 5 and slide 7, and you're going to be submitting those this week. Deliverable length, proper spelling, and grading, obviously. No, wait, this is last week, sorry. That's close, man. Yeah. All right. Week 3. Front of the house design and mood board. And, all right, ladies and gents, can everybody see that? We all good? Okay, so this is the assignment for this week. 20% of your grade is going to come from the flow, like Chef Suzanne was talking about. The layout of the dining room, is it operationally effective? Can people get around? Sanitation, the hand sinks, right? The service staff areas, they have to have, front of the houses have to have sanitation buckets. You have to provide a place to put those sanitation buckets, and those go in service areas. Visual appeal, we talked about the ambience, the mood, some colors to use. We talked about elements as well that would create that certain mood in your dining room. It needs to be, the mood board needs to be coherent with visual style and mood, and those are the pictures that you're gonna cut and paste and put down onto slide 7. And then clear and concise summary of your concept. Do not forget to include that. It is extremely important. And does anybody have any questions? Any thoughts, concerns? No? Ladies and gents, fantastic week 3. We look forward to seeing everybody next week. And as usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. That's what we're here for. You guys take care and have a great day.